Hey everybody, it is Charles Johnson. I'm doing the Got News Researcher Chuck Johnson podcast. I don't really know how to brand this. I'm not very good at that. I just like to do research and right wrongs. Um, so we're here today to talk about a friend of mine. To talk about a friend of mine who's getting the crap kicked out of him by former friends of mine. And the person in question is this guy, Matt Tyrmand. Matt Tyrmand is a Jewish, Polish guy who I met several years back in New York, where he lives and works. And he is a sometimes contributor to Breitbart, where he writes about Polish issues, because that's something he cares very deeply about. His father, Leopold Tyrmand, this is the father's book, Leopold Tyrmand, is a celebrated. He's a celebrated dissident, sort of Polish Jewish dissident, who many of his family, died in the war. And it's worth recalling this. I just want to read the back cover of this because you got to understand this. The context of this is important. This is who Tyrmand's father is. Okay. Leopold Tyrmand, a Polish Jew who survived World War II by working in Germany under a false identity, would go on to live and write under Poland's communist regime for 20 years before emigrating to the West, where he continued to express his deeply felt anti-communist views. Diary 1944, that's the name of the book, written after the independent weekly paper that employed him was closed by refusing to mourn Stalin's death, is an account of daily life in communist Poland. Like Milos, or Cisla Myslo, I guess that's how you guys say the guy's name. I remember reading this guy's stuff in college, but anyway, and Václav Havel and other dissidents who describe the absurdities of Soviet-backed regimes, Tyrmand exposes the lies, big and small, that sustain totalitarian power. Witty and insightful, Tyrmand's diary is a chronicle of a man who uses seemingly minor modes of resistance. As a provocative journalist, a Warsaw intellectual, the spiritual father of Polish hipsters, and a promoter of jazz in Poland to maintain his freedom of thought. Now, this is the father of my friend Matt Tyrmand. And Tyrmand was kind enough to sign over this book to me, which I must confess I read some of, but frankly, like, communism sucks. I got the memo a long time ago. The father, Tyrmand wrote this thing. He said, "Dear Charles, what can I say? You know I love you, and I have a ton of respect for what you do. You never cease to impress, and I do not impress easily." These are extremely kind words. "I think you will love the primary account of Iron Curtain communism. Like you, my father was a true original." Where to begin on this? Every regime has a sort of animating lie at its heart. And communism's was that we're all equal. America, and you have to be sort of compelled to be equal. America's is that there is no elite, that anyone can become anything. That's sort of the animating lie of this country, or at least one of them. And there's a tension going on in the world right now. You probably felt it yourself. Donald Trump, president, right? Donald Trump wants to build a wall. Donald Trump is a nationalist. Donald Trump wants to push back on certain bullshit in the world. And Donald Trump is not alone. I mean, when I went to Hungary, I met with the mayor of Bastalom, who was the guy who decided to come up with the wall. He was attacked, and basically as an anti-Semite, they attacked him. The press, the foreign press in particular, came after him extremely hard. This is what happens. If you're a nationalist, you become an anti-Semite. This is just the way it goes. And even though there's no proof, even though you hire Jews, even though sometimes you marry Jews, sometimes you employ them, it doesn't matter. If you're opposed to a globalist, agenda, then you're attacked for being an anti-Semite. It's like clockwork. It's like tick, 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 tick. It always comes up. Now, why do I mention all this? This is a lot of exposition before I get to the main point. The main point is Matt Tyrmand is being slimed for a piece he wrote criticizing Washington Post columnist Anne Applebaum. And Anne Applebaum, just so you know, is a journalist but she's more probably described as a lobbyist. She is married to a member of the former Polish government that was thrown out for essentially being corrupt and for essentially giving away the country to immigrants and to EU and basically eroding sovereignty. The guy's name is Radoslaw Sikorski. And just so you're aware, Sikorski, this is not a pleasant guy. This is a guy who's gotten into serious trouble. He couldn't basically be discreet, and he was a foreign minister who was essentially fired. Like that was basically what happened. His career ended in ruin. And this is what he says. Okay, so this is what he says in elite conversation. So this is like what he really actually thinks. He says he's reported to have said, "The Polish-American alliance is worthless. It is even harmful because it creates a false sense of security for Poland." And he goes on and he attacks the government, his opponent government, the law and justice government. And he says, if we allow these people to come to power, we're going to antagonize Germany and Russia. And this is the law and justice government. They think everything is okay because we have given a blowjob to the Americans. These people are losers, total losers. Now, Anne Applebaum is married to this guy, and she has repeatedly shilled for basically globalist things. She was against Brexit. This is all her right. Like, she has every right to do this. But this is stuff that's not really disclosed at the Washington Post where she works. So Tyrmand has been running around calling attention to this. And Tyrmand, who, as we mentioned earlier, is a Jew, Tyrmand has been attacked. And he has been savaged for basically drawing attention to Anne Applebaum, because Tyrmand dared to do something. Tyrmand dared to name the fact that Anne Applebaum is Jewish, something that she's never had any trouble discussing. She's repeatedly mentioned it, and so this is Media Matters. This is Media Matters, and this is them attacking Tyrmand. And Tyrmand says this is the money quote. This is the thing that really pisses them off. And this is an ironic, funny, playful comment by Tyrmand, who's a bit of a neurotic Jew. Like, I'm just going to be honest about it. He's a friend of mine. I like him. But he's a bit neurotic. He talks too much. He uses way too many adjectives. And he likes to just throw bombs. He's a brawler. And anyway, so here's what he says. He says, "Hell hath no fury like a Polish Jewish American elitist scorned." Ooh, cutting a little close. Polish Jewish American elitist scorned. That's what he says. Okay. Now, what happened then is kind of interesting, because the full kind of neocon machine, PR machine, went into overdrive to come after Tyrmand. And they're trying to get him fired from a job he volunteers for. He helps out the Polish government. By the way, if the Polish government were so anti-Semitic, the new government, the nationalist government, why are they palling around? Why is he hanging out with the foreign minister, the prime minister of Poland? Why is he hanging out? Why are they hanging out with a Jew? Right? If this is such a terrible... But of course, it's not really about anti-Semitism. It's about people who are nationalists, and they're nationalist Jews just as they're globalist Jews. Steve Miller, who advises Trump, is a Jew, and he's for Trump. There are many Jews who are for Trump, and there are many Jews who are against Trump. And of course, there's a lot of money. I think it's like 96% of the people who give money officially, and there's a lot of like secret money floating around, give money to Democrats. So, that's sort of like what's going on there. Now, he was savaged by this guy, John Podhoretz. Now, John Podhoretz is the son of Norman Podhoretz, who is sort of the founder of neoconservatism, or one of the founders of neoconservatism, I should say, along with Irving Kristol. Now, these are guys who are basically pretty vicious. They're pretty nasty to anyone they disagree with. So this is what John Podhoretz of the New York Post said. So Podhoretz said the column was "quote unquote" disgusting, and described Tyrmand as a foul, rotten human being. Now, this is the kind of language that a columnist for the New York Post writes. Now, he wrote a similar sort of thing. He attacked me a while back when I was talking about James Foley, who was a liberal do-gooder who went over to the Middle East, who converted to Islam, and then was later sold to ISIS and was decapitated, but not before condemning the United States of America. He basically went out like a bitch. And I said it on Twitter, and Podhoretz went off. He's called me mentally ill. He's called me a sick fuck. He's called me all these things. I mean, this is a guy who has mental health issues. And by the way, if somebody could go and get me his divorce papers from his first marriage, I would reward you handsomely, because I'm told that there's quite a lot of stuff in there about how he was emotionally abusive to his wife and did a number of other things. Basically, he is a foul human being. So whenever he attacks somebody for being foul, rotten human being, whenever he does that, it's usually an indication that I should go become friends with this person. But fortunately, I was already friends with Matthew Tyrmand. He then there are others who go on, and Yair Rosenberg, who's this guy at Tablet magazine, a publication I once wrote for, said Breitbart goes full anti-Semite. Today's anti-Semitic Breitbart eruption is a reminder that a vote for Trump is a vote for mainstreaming anti-Semites. Okay, this is the guy who grew up with, was educated by Jews, who's friends with Jews, who hires Jews who later probably died of AIDS, like in the form of Roy Cohn. This is a guy. I mean, this is Trump. This is like what he's about. His daughter married a Jew, okay, like one of the richest Jews out there, but married a Jew. His daughter became a Jew. His daughter bore Jewish children. These things speak for themselves. Now, later, Sohrab Ahmari accused Breitbart of going goes full Daily Stormer, which is a reference to this supposed anti-Semitic white nationalist website. And he said, quote, Breitbart is increasingly indistinguishable from outlets on the white power fringe. I mean, this is just absurd. Like Sohrab Ahmari, this guy I used to know. I used to buy him drinks, used to buy him dinner and things in New York. Actually introduced him to a number of people in New York. He now writes for the Wall Street Journal editorial page, a position he's woefully underqualified for. And, he writes editorials. Some of these editorials have been criticized, but he has his job because he's an Iranian, or he's a Persian descent, I think he would prefer, who goes on and attacks, Iran on behalf of a lot of Jewish neoconservatives. Nothing wrong with that, but that's basically what goes on. Next, we have Jamie Kirchick, who described the column as a, quote, anti-Semitic attack and anti-Semitic filth. Now, Jamie Kirchick calls basically everyone an anti-Semite. He never discloses the fact that he's often paid by foreign governments to go on junkets, and he writes hit pieces all the time on various people. I once called him a conniving, malicious faggot, which is pretty much right. There's really sort of no way around that. Commentary Magazine attacked it. This is the usual sort of stuff. Now, why is this interesting? Well, it's interesting because it shows the desperation. There are a number of people who get their funding from in their neoconservative think tanks. They get their funding from a series of sort of secular Jewish hedge funds who give money to these various charities, which essentially operate as influence operators. So Tyrmand, in calling Anne Applebaum, who's married to a member of the deposed Polish government, which is not disclosed, just not mentioned, don't need to know it. It's not important, right? Don't pay attention. Don't pay attention to this man behind the curtain. Tyrmand accuses Anne Applebaum of having a series of columns that essentially do the bidding of the various globalist interests that have made her and her family wealthy. And he accuses her of basically orchestrating a campaign to smear the nationalist government in Poland. And what happens? She and a number of her allies orchestrate a campaign to smear Tyrmand. And they're trying to get him fired from a job. Again, he volunteers. He doesn't get paid by the Polish government. This is a guy who's, I like Tyrmand, but, I'm always buying his drinks. You know what I mean? This guy's not rolling in it. He's not some sort of influence lobbyist type. He's not like the people who started the, neoconservative think tank, Michael Goldfarb, who was actually a registered lobbyist for Georgia and for Taiwan. He actually got paid by those governments to create, media and propaganda in the United States for those governments. That's what he did for a living, and created the Washington Free Beacon, which is a neoconservative think tank. So this is what's up. This is the situation. And so I just wanted to be on the side of Tyrmand. Of course, I'll be probably called an anti-Semite for doing this, for defending my Jewish Polish friend who I love dearly. But you got to just call out the lies. You just got to call out the bullshit. And so that's sort of what I'm doing here. And it's interesting, by the way, it's interesting how you can often see the money. So, Red State founder Eric Erickson once told me that Paul Singer, who's a hedge fund guy, was looking at buying Red State. Erickson has sort of moved into the more cuck establishment right side of things. And anyway, so Red State, this publication that's dedicated to talking about, like supposedly conservative politics. Red State, went after, Red State basically went after him. So did Twitchy, a number of these sort of conservative properties that are owned by Salem. And it's just interesting stuff. I don't know what to make of it. It's like this weird idea that you should slur somebody, and it's basically a way of attacking Trump without attacking Trump. Because you see, Breitbart, because Steve Bannon headed it, Breitbart, which publishes hundreds of articles, I think it's like one of the top websites in the world right now. Breitbart has Steve Bannon, who's now Trump's campaign CEO and campaign manager. And so Breitbart, because it publishes for free, doesn't pay for them, columns from Matthew Tyrmand on occasion about Poland, it must be all part of like some elaborate conspiracy. Does this not sound like daft to somebody? I mean, this is a ambitious, well-read young man who cares about the country his father grew up in, who had to emigrate, who's come back to Poland to help the Polish government try to basically make Poland great again, to borrow a phrase. And he's being smeared by these internationalist, globalist types. And he's being smeared as an anti-Semite. Why? Because he draws attention to the fact that Anne Applebaum is Jewish, which she draws attention to herself. I don't get it. It's weird. But of course I do get it, and so do you. With that, I'm going to sign off for this very long video, and I'll probably embed it in my story over at Got News. If you want to hear more of these types of videos, hit me up. Happy to do more of them. If there are topics I should be talking about that I'm not, please subscribe. Like my stuff on Facebook, the usual stuff. Give me money if you want to see certain types of things. And yeah, looking forward to it. Take care.